Welcome to True Revenge Stories. Today, you'll hear the powerful journey of Olivia, a woman betrayed in business, but who rose stronger than ever to claim her victory. Stay tuned until the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more real revenge stories. My name is Olivia Carter. If you're hearing this, know that my story isn't just about coffee or business, it's about survival, resilience, and refusing to bow down to giants. I was born and raised in a small town in Ohio. My parents weren't rich. My dad was a truck driver, and my mom worked part-time at a local bakery. Life was simple, sometimes tough, but it taught me one important lesson: if you want something in life, you fight for it. From the time I was little, I loved the smell of coffee. My mother always brewed fresh coffee every morning before my dad went to work. That aroma, the warmth, the comfort, became a part of me. I used to think, one day, I'll own a place where people don't just drink coffee, they feel at home. But dreams are expensive. After high school, I went to college on scholarships and worked nights at a diner. I learned how to serve customers, how to smile even when I was exhausted, and how to listen to people. Trust me, people don't come to diners for food only. They come to talk, to share, to feel like someone notices them. That's when I realized, service is more powerful than the product. After graduation, I landed a job at a big retail company. I thought it was a golden opportunity, good pay, a steady career. But inside those corporate walls, I learned a dark truth: the bigger the company, the colder the heart. I watched how small businesses around us were crushed, undercut by pricing strategies, bullied with contracts, and drowned in competition they couldn't match. And every time a local shop closed down, I felt a sting in my heart. That could be me one day. That could be my dream cafe. So, after 5 years in corporate, I did something people called crazy. I quit. I used every bit of my savings, just $20,000, to open a small coffee shop in the heart of my town. It wasn't fancy. The walls were second-hand painted, the furniture was thrifted, and the espresso machine was old but reliable. But it was mine. I named it the Cozy Cup. The day I opened, only a handful of customers walked in. Some were curious, others just wanted to try something new. I remember standing behind the counter, my hands shaking as I poured the first latte. I whispered to myself, "This is it, Olivia. Your dream is real now." The first few months were tough. Rent, bills, supplies, it all drained my savings quickly. Some days, I wondered if I had made the worst mistake of my life. But then something magical happened: people started coming back. Not just for coffee, but for the atmosphere. I greeted every customer with their name. I remembered how they liked their drinks. I decorated the place with books, local art, and cozy chairs so it felt like a living room, not just a shop. Slowly, the Cozy Cup became more than a cafe, it became a community. But just as I started to breathe, the storm came. One morning, I saw construction across the street. At first, I thought it was just another store. But then I saw the sign, "Starbrew Coffee, coming soon." A big chain. Huge. Known nationwide. My heart sank. Everyone told me the same thing: "Olivia, you're done. You can't compete with them. Sell your place before it's too late." But I refused. I thought of my parents, my sacrifices, my customers who believed in me. I thought of that little girl who used to dream in the smell of coffee. I couldn't just walk away. So I made a vow that day. If I can't win with money, I'll win with heart. And that's where the real war began. When the Starbrew coffee board went up across the street, I felt like my heart was being squeezed. They were a billion-dollar chain with glossy branding, celebrity endorsements, and endless money to spend. I was just one woman with a second-hand espresso machine. But here's the thing: I wasn't ready to surrender. The first week Starbrew opened, my sales dropped by almost 40%. I watched from my shop window as long lines formed outside their shiny glass doors. My cafe looked small and almost invisible compared to their neon signs and fancy posters. For a few nights, I cried in my storeroom. I thought about closing. But every time, I remembered the faces of my regulars: Sarah, who always came in before work for her black coffee, Mr. Jenkins, an old man who sat for hours reading his newspaper, and little Emma, who loved my hot chocolate more than anything. If I gave up, I wouldn't just lose a business, I'd lose them. So I started thinking, what can I give my customers that Starbrew never will? The answer came quickly: connection. Chains sell coffee. I sell belonging. I launched something I called Community Nights. Every Friday, my cafe stayed open late. Local musicians played acoustic sets, poets read their work, and sometimes we even had open mic comedy. The crowd was small at first, but within weeks, the place was overflowing. I also started a pay-it-forward board. Customers could buy an extra cup of coffee for someone in need. I pinned little notes on the wall: free coffee waiting for you, just ask. It warmed people's hearts. Word spread, and strangers started coming in just to see this kindness in action. Meanwhile, across the street, Starbrew looked the same every day: identical cups, robotic greetings, and zero soul. And it worked. One morning, I opened the cafe and found something incredible: a line of people waiting outside my shop. Not Starbrew's. Mine. But the war was far from over. Starbrew noticed the shift. Their manager, a sharp-suited man named Richard, started sending his staff into my shop. They'd sit at tables, order the cheapest thing on the menu, and write notes. They were spying on me. Soon after, I began seeing strange ads online: coupons for free Starbrew coffee, special discounts, buy one get one free deals. It was clear, they were trying to crush me by slashing prices. For a few weeks, it worked. My sales dropped again. Customers told me, "Sorry Olivia, I love your place, but times are hard. Free coffee is free coffee." I won't lie. I almost broke. But then I asked myself a hard question: do I want to survive, or do I want to fight? I chose to fight. I doubled down on authenticity. I sourced beans from small farmers, even if it cost more. I shared their stories on my chalkboard: this coffee comes from a family farm in Colombia. Every cup supports their children's education. I trained my staff, just 3 people at the time, to treat customers like family. No scripts, no fake smiles. Just genuine care. I also did something bold: I started a loyalty journal. Instead of plastic punch cards, we had a handwritten book where every customer signed their name. Each time they visited, we wrote down their favorite drink with a little doodle or note. Over time, it became a living memory of the community. People loved it. They felt seen. Starbrew couldn't copy that. Still, Richard wasn't done. One afternoon, he walked into my cafe himself. Tall, smug, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nice little place you've got here," he said, glancing around like he was already planning to buy it. "But you can't hold out forever. Why don't you sell? You'll save yourself a lot of pain." I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "This place is my life. And I don't sell my life to strangers." He chuckled, dropped his business card on the counter, and left. That night, I couldn't sleep. Fear whispered in my ear, what if he's right? What if I can't hold out forever? But then I remembered the laughter during our community nights, the smiles of people signing the loyalty journal, and the way Emma's eyes lit up when she got her hot chocolate. And I whispered back to the fear, "Watch me." The next morning, I put on my apron, brewed the first pot of coffee, and opened the doors to the cozy cup. The war was just beginning. The weeks rolled on, and every day felt like a battle. Richard and his Starbrew empire weren't just playing fair competition. They were suffocating me. Flyers offering free coffee for a week appeared all over the neighborhood. Digital billboards flashed with Starbrew's logo. They sponsored local radio shows, and their delivery scooters zipped through every street like a swarm of locusts. Meanwhile, my little cafe couldn't afford ads. I didn't have a fleet of scooters or flashy billboards. What I had was grit. And heart. But grit doesn't always pay bills. Some mornings, I opened my cash drawer and stared at the emptiness. After paying rent, suppliers, and my staff, there was barely anything left for me. I remember one night when I skipped dinner because I couldn't afford groceries. The irony stung. I was feeding everyone else, but I couldn't feed myself. Still, I refused to bend. Instead, I got smarter. I started to notice something Starbrew couldn't hide: their staff was miserable. They were overworked, underpaid, and treated like disposable parts. Many of them, during their breaks, secretly visited my cafe. At first, I thought they were just curious. But then one young barista confessed, "Olivia, it feels human here. Over there, I'm just a number." That gave me an idea. I began quietly hiring some of Starbrew's best people, the ones who were tired of being treated like machines. I offered them less money than Starbrew, sure, but more respect. I promised them creative freedom. "Here, you can invent drinks," I told them. "Name them after yourself, or your grandma, or your favorite song. Let's make coffee personal." And they did. Soon, my menu exploded with new creations: Lena's lavender latte, Marco's midnight mocha, Sarah's cinnamon swirl. Customers loved it. Not just for the taste, but for the stories behind each drink. Starbrew couldn't copy that. They were too busy following corporate recipes. But Richard wasn't blind. One morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a letter. "Olivia, you're making this harder than it needs to be. This is your last chance. Sell your cafe, or we'll bury you. You have no idea what we're capable of." My hands trembled as I read it. This wasn't just competition anymore. It was a threat. I sat in the empty cafe long after closing, staring at the wooden counter I had polished 1,000 times. I thought about giving up. Maybe selling wouldn't be so bad. I could walk away, debt-free, and start fresh somewhere else. But then, something inside me flared. Why should I let a giant bully erase everything I'd built with love? Why should I let him win just because he had more money? No. Not yet. That night, I designed a plan. The next morning, I launched the Cozy Cup Challenge. Here's how it worked: every customer who came in could bring a friend. If the friend had never been to my cafe before, they'd get their first drink free. The catch? They had to write a note on our kindness wall, a board filled with uplifting messages for strangers. It was simple. It was cheap. And it spread like wildfire. Photos of the kindness wall started appearing on Instagram. Influencers came by, curious. Local newspapers wrote about it: "Small cafe creates big heart in the community." Suddenly, I wasn't just a coffee shop. I was a movement. And people rallied behind me. When Starbrew slashed prices again, customers shrugged. "We'd rather pay full price at Cozy Cup than get fake smiles for free," one man told me. Business picked up. Sales climbed. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But Richard? Oh, he was furious. One evening, he stormed into my cafe again. His face was red, his jaw tight. "You think this is cute?" he hissed, leaning over the counter. "You think you can beat me with some silly wall and free lattes? I own this street, Olivia. And if you don't stop, I'll make sure you regret it." The cafe went dead silent. Everyone was watching. I smiled calmly, though my heart was pounding. "Richard," I said softly, "you own a brand. But I own love. And love doesn't go out of business." The crowd erupted in applause. Richard's face turned pale, then furious. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. That was the night I realized something important. This wasn't just about coffee anymore. This was about survival. About dignity. About showing the world that even the smallest voice can roar when pushed into a corner. And I wasn't done roaring yet. After Richard's public outburst, things changed. Not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. People started seeing Starbrew for what it really was, a bully in a fancy suit. Customers who once flocked there began trickling into my cafe, whispering things like, "Olivia, we're here because we believe in you." It wasn't just about coffee anymore. It was about community, about values. But Richard wasn't done. Within a week, posters went up around town: Starbrew Community Fair, free drinks, live music, huge giveaways. He was going big. Too big. I knew it wasn't about generosity. It was about crushing me once and for all. The night before his event, I sat alone in my cafe, staring at the empty tables. My staff had gone home, exhausted. My head ached with worry. If his fair worked, my little spike in sales would vanish. But then, I remembered something. Starbrew had money. I had people. So, I picked up my phone and called Lena, my head barista. "Lena," I said, "tomorrow, we fight with heart. I want you to call everyone, every regular customer, every friend, every old neighbor. Tell them tomorrow, we're hosting something too. Not a fair. A festival. A family." She laughed nervously. "Olivia, we don't have money for a festival." "We don't need money," I said. "We need soul." The day of the battle. When morning came, Starbrew's event was everywhere: tents, music, flashing lights. Richard stood on a stage, grinning like a king. His voice boomed over the speakers. "Welcome to Starbrew's Community Fair. Free drinks for everyone. Forget the rest, this is the best." But just down the street, my little cafe was buzzing. We called it the Cozy Festival. There were no big lights, no stage, no fancy giveaways. But we had local musicians playing acoustic guitars, children painting on canvases, and grandmothers baking cookies they donated from their own kitchens. The aroma of cinnamon and cocoa filled the air. Kids laughed as they wrote notes for the kindness wall. Couples sat close, sipping lattes with their names scribbled in heart shapes on the cups. And something magical happened. People began leaving Richard's flashy fair and walking toward us. They said Starbrew felt cold, corporate, like a sales pitch. But at my place, they felt seen. By the end of the day, my cafe was packed shoulder to shoulder. People spilled out onto the sidewalk, holding mugs, clapping to the music. I stood behind the counter, tears stinging my eyes. For the first time, it felt like the community had chosen me, not just as a business, but as a home. Richard strikes back. Of course, Richard saw everything. Late that night, when I was closing up, he appeared again, this time with a smirk instead of anger. "Well, congratulations," he said, leaning against the counter. "You won a popularity contest. But this isn't about who's liked. It's about who lasts. And I have the money to last forever." I folded my arms. "Then why are you here, Richard? If you're so secure, why are you wasting your time on me?" His smirk faltered for just a second. Then he leaned closer. "Because people like you are dangerous. You give others ideas. You make them think they can fight giants. And that is bad for business." With that, he walked out, leaving the air heavy with tension. The turning point. The next week, something unexpected happened. One of Richard's ex-managers, let's call her Grace, came to my cafe. She sat across from me, nervous, glancing at the door like she was afraid of being followed. "Olivia," she whispered, "I've seen what Richard's planning. He's not stopping with you. He's targeting every independent cafe in the city. He wants a monopoly. And he'll cheat to get it." My stomach dropped. Grace showed me emails, contracts, and internal memos. Starbrew wasn't just competing, they were buying inspectors, manipulating suppliers, and forcing landlords to evict small cafes. It was corruption. Pure and simple. At that moment, I realized something: I wasn't just fighting for my cafe. I was fighting for all of us. So, I made a decision. I reached out to the other small cafe owners Richard had threatened. At first, they were hesitant. They saw me as competition too. But when I showed them Grace's evidence, their eyes widened. This isn't just about me, I told them. It's about survival. If we don't unite, Starbrew will swallow us all. And slowly, one by one, they agreed. We formed a coalition, the Independent Coffee Alliance. Together, we pooled resources. We shared suppliers, cross-promoted each other, and built a network strong enough to withstand Starbrew's pressure. For the first time, Richard wasn't fighting one small cafe. He was fighting dozens. And this time, we weren't backing down. That was the spark that turned a simple rivalry into a full-blown war. And deep down, I knew, Richard wasn't going to let this slide. He would come back harder, dirtier, and more ruthless than ever. But I also knew something else. I wasn't alone anymore. And together, we had the power to take him down. The Independent Coffee Alliance was born out of fear, but it quickly turned into something bigger, something powerful. Every week, cafe owners gathered in my little shop after hours. We shared stories of Richard's intimidation tactics, suppliers suddenly raising prices, landlords accidentally losing lease agreements, inspectors showing up unannounced with impossible demands. Richard was trying to choke us from every angle. But for every move he made, we countered. When suppliers raised prices, we pulled our orders and bought in bulk. When inspectors tried to fine one cafe, we raised money from the rest to cover costs. When landlords threatened eviction, we organized petitions and drew media attention. What once felt like isolated attacks now became opportunities for unity. Richard's strategy had backfired, he had created his own enemy army. One night, Grace came to me again with more evidence. This time, it wasn't just shady memos. It was proof, signed contracts, bank statements, even recorded calls of Richard bribing officials. "This is enough to bury him," she said, sliding the folder across my table. But I hesitated. Going to the press meant going to war publicly. It wasn't just my cafe on the line anymore, it was dozens. If Richard retaliated, some of us wouldn't survive. Still, the community deserved to know the truth. So, after a sleepless night, I made the call. The local newspaper ran the headline the next week. Starbrew caught in corruption scandal, bribes, monopolies, and bullying tactics exposed. It spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, bloggers tore into it, and social media raged. Suddenly, Richard wasn't the untouchable mogul anymore. He was the villain. Customers began boycotting Starbrew. Hashtags like #SupportLocalCoffee and #StarbrewScandal trended online. Even politicians began making statements about protecting small businesses. For the first time, Richard was on defense. Richard's counterattack. But if I thought he'd go down quietly, I was wrong. One evening, as I was closing up, I found the front window of my cafe shattered, glass everywhere, coffee beans spilled like blood across the floor. There was no note. No signature. But I didn't need one. I knew who was behind it. The next morning, Richard called me. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Accidents happen, Olivia. But here's some advice, stop playing hero. Heroes don't survive long." I clenched my jaw. "You're scared, Richard. That's why you're lashing out." He chuckled darkly. "Scared? No. Annoyed, maybe. You think your little alliance can stop me? I built an empire. You run a toy shop with cookies and fairy lights. Don't mistake pity for power." And then he hung up. But he was wrong. This wasn't pity. This was war. The turning of the tide. Days later, something unexpected happened. Customers who saw the broken window started donating. Some gave $5, others $50. Kids emptied piggy banks, old men offered to paint walls, students volunteered to sweep floors. Within a week, not only was the window replaced, but the entire cafe got a fresh makeover, new paint, new lights, new life. And it wasn't just my cafe. The same thing happened across the city. Every time Starbrew tried to crush a small shop, the community stepped in to rebuild it stronger. Richard's money couldn't compete with love. The business alliance's masterstroke. At our next meeting, one cafe owner, Javier, suggested something bold. "What if we launch a citywide coffee pass?" he said. "One card, 20 cafes. Customers can visit any of our shops and get discounts. It's not just about competition anymore, it's about culture. We're offering something Starbrew never can: variety, authenticity, and heart." The room lit up with excitement. Within weeks, posters went up everywhere. "Discover the real taste of coffee, join the independent coffee tour." It was brilliant. Customers weren't just picking one cafe, they were choosing all of us. Tourists loved it. Students loved it. Even office workers who usually grabbed quick lattes started exploring different cafes every week. Sales skyrocketed. Loyalty deepened. And most importantly, we weren't just surviving, we were thriving. Richard's desperation. When Richard saw the numbers, he lost control. He stormed into my cafe one last time, fists clenched, eyes blazing. "You think this is over?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "You humiliated me in the press, turned customers against me, and ruined years of work. You think you've won?" I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Richard. We've won. Because this was never about me, it was about us. And you can't destroy us all." For a moment, his face twisted with rage. But then, something shifted. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dulled. He looked less like a giant and more like a man who finally realized his empire was crumbling. Without another word, he turned and walked out. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Aftermath. Starbrew's scandals grew too loud to ignore. Lawsuits piled up. Investors pulled out. Within a year, the company shrank to half its size, retreating from the city it once tried to dominate. Meanwhile, the Independent Coffee Alliance flourished. We weren't just cafes anymore, we were a movement. Festivals, cultural events, charity drives, we became the beating heart of the community. As for me, one quiet evening, I stood outside my cafe, watching the sunset reflect on the new windows. Laughter drifted out from inside, customers, friends, family. And I realized something: Richard was wrong. Heroes do survive. Because real power isn't built on fear or money. It's built on love, unity, and resilience. And that can never be destroyed. Months passed after Richard's downfall, but the city still buzzed with the story. Customers would whisper as they sipped their cappuccinos. "That's Olivia, the one who stood up against Starbrew." At first, I hated the attention. I wasn't a warrior or a politician, I was just someone who loved coffee and wanted to share that love with people. But gradually, I realized something. My fight hadn't just saved my cafe. It had ignited a revolution. The Independent Coffee Alliance wasn't just surviving anymore, it was evolving. We launched coffee festivals, inviting musicians, artists, and storytellers. We partnered with local farmers, ensuring fair prices and organic beans. Our cafes became more than shops, they became cultural centers, places where people felt at home. One evening, after closing, I sat alone in my cafe. The lights were dim, the air smelled of roasted beans, and the only sound was the ticking of the clock. I thought back to where it all began. The day I opened my cafe with trembling hands. The first time I faced Richard's threats. The nights I doubted myself, wondering if I was strong enough. And the moment I realized I wasn't fighting alone. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Because against all odds, we had built something stronger than any empire. A few weeks later, a man walked into my cafe. His hair was gray, his suit worn, and his shoulders slouched as though carrying years of regret. It was Richard. For a moment, silence hung between us. My staff froze, waiting for a confrontation. But he simply raised a hand and said, "Relax. I didn't come to fight." I hesitated, then nodded for him to sit. He ordered a plain black coffee, nothing fancy, nothing like the flashy drinks his chain was known for. When he took his first sip, his hands trembled. "This," he whispered. "This is what I lost sight of." I studied him carefully. He looked smaller, weaker, not the tyrant I once feared, but a man stripped of his armor. "Why are you here, Richard?" I asked softly. He sighed. "To say that I was wrong. I thought power meant control, money, domination. But I destroyed everything that truly mattered. My company is collapsing, my investors abandoned me, and my family doesn't even speak to me anymore." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, quietly, he said, "You won, Olivia. And honestly, I'm glad you did." That night, I wrestled with a choice. Part of me wanted to stay angry. After all, Richard had tried to destroy me, my business, and countless others. Shouldn't he pay for that forever? But another part of me remembered something my grandmother once told me. Bitterness chains you to the past. Forgiveness sets you free. So, the next morning, I walked into the cafe with a decision. I found Richard sitting in the corner again, staring into his empty cup. "You don't need to keep apologizing," I told him. "But if you really want redemption, there's something you can do." He looked up, confused. "Use your skills, the business mind you have, not to destroy, but to rebuild. Support the same small businesses you once tried to crush. Help them grow instead of suffocating them. That's how you can start to make things right." For the first time, I saw something in his eyes I never thought I'd see: humility. Weeks later, Richard actually did it. He sold off what was left of Starbrew and began investing in independent businesses. Not just coffee shops, but bakeries, bookstores, even farmers' markets. People were skeptical at first. But slowly, he rebuilt his reputation, not as a tyrant, but as a man who had fallen and found his way back. As for me, my cafe kept thriving. But I never forgot the lessons I had learned. That unity is stronger than greed. That community can rebuild anything. And that even the darkest enemies can change, if given the chance. Years later, when people asked me how I did it, how a single cafe survived against a giant corporation, I always told them the same thing. It wasn't me. It was us. One shop can be broken. But a community? That can't be destroyed. And every time I said it, I meant it. Because in the end, the real victory wasn't beating Richard. It was proving that kindness, integrity, and love could outlast any empire built on fear. I never thought I'd stand here one day, stronger than I ever imagined. When I first walked into that office, I was just a simple woman with big dreams. I wanted nothing more than to build a future through hard work, dedication, and honesty. But life had other plans for me. It tested me with betrayal, deceit, and heartbreak that nearly crushed me. For a long time, I asked myself, why me? Why did my own partners, people I trusted like family, stab me in the back? Why did I lose everything I had worked so hard to build? At night, I cried myself to sleep, drowning in doubt and anger. I questioned whether I even had the strength to continue. But the truth is, those dark days became my fire. Every insult, every betrayal, every time they told me, "You can't do it," those words fueled me. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. I took their rejection and turned it into power. And step by step, brick by brick, I created something they could never destroy. Today, my business stands not only as a company but as a symbol of resilience. It's proof that no matter how many times life tries to break you, you can rise again, stronger, smarter, and more unstoppable than ever. Do I regret the pain? No. Because that pain forged me into who I am today. Without it, I would never have discovered the fire that was hidden inside me all along. To those who betrayed me, I don't even need revenge anymore. My success is my answer. My empire is my justice. And every day they see me thrive, they are reminded of what they lost, the chance to stand beside me when greatness was within their reach. If you are listening to my story right now, I want you to remember one thing: never let betrayal define you. Never let failure be your ending. Take every scar, every wound, and use it as your armor. Because if I can rise from nothing, if I can turn my deepest pain into my greatest strength, then so can you. This is not just my story. This is proof that true power comes not from revenge, but from rebuilding yourself so strong that nothing and no one can ever break you again. And that is my revenge. This was Olivia's story, a reminder that betrayal doesn't define you, your comeback does. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to True Revenge Stories for more powerful tales of justice and redemption. See you in the next story.